Don't trump on ash, Taya. Hello. Just give me one sec. Just getting organized. Hi, hang on. Studio mode. Just give me 1 second. I forgot to I got to set it so it automatically refreshes the chat cache every time. Hang on 1 sec. And, because I'm my own producer. Become a patron. So I can just, anyway, I'll still be my own producer. Become a patron so I can justify the 3 hours it's going to take to automate all these things. How's that sound? Overlays. Just 1 sec. Refresh. Okay. Back to main. Okay. And then that off. Okay. There we go. Hello. Twice in 2 days. Fuck me. I don't know if there's anyone around at the moment because just let me get all of the things. Sort of, just give me 1 sec. I need to, I was actually mad typing right up until the last second on my outline for this. So just give me 2 seconds. This is what live streams are for, everybody, which is, this is where you go, hi, everyone. Welcome to my show. I don't know. You say some wanky shit. I'm not media trained in any way. I find saying my own name like embarrassing. Hearing my name announced is embarrassing. It's all embarrassing. And I don't have any training at all in this shit. So I just figure it out as I go along. And then I was just like, fucking learn how to introduce a show, Taya. Don't just start talking. But I go, hi, everybody. Like and subscribe. Whatever the fuck. I don't even know if I'm talking to anyone. There we go.
What a load of old shit.
Just give me 1 sec. Okay, let me get organized and then I can see any chats that come in if anyone's watching. It's not okay. I'm on zero. It's such a weird fucking thing where you like trying to find the right time of day. And also, oh, hang on. No, I'm looking at the wrong one. Okay, so we're in business. Now I can see things. So I've got my laptop now running the chat so that the computer doesn't slow down. Hopefully we don't get too much choppiness. We may. Not much I can do about it, but, I do the best I can. If you become a patron, I'm launching my membership site the next week. I've got client work to do, so I get paid so I can keep my car. I've got some client work to do, like to get through this week, but I will be definitely focused on launching the courses and stuff next week. Uni's back, so that's a bit of fun, but if you can become a patron, it just eases the load for me. Again, I know everyone's struggling, but the best thing that you can do for me is to recommend me or, give me timestamps so I can edit clips because it's easy. The hard part of editing is the, rewatching, especially because I go for 2 hours or whatever it takes, an hour on double speed every time you go through it to try and find a clip. So it's a bit of a hassle, right? So you can imagine how long that sort of stuff takes. Now, there are AI tools coming for editing that will do the job, but at the same time, then you need a computer with the fucking speed and specs to be able to handle that shit. And unfortunately, I'm in that thing. So it all comes down to give me money, become a patron. Pay me to keep my clothes on. My son thinks that's the funniest joke in the world, which is he's like, you should set up an only fans. And I was like, no, what I should do is have people pay me so I don't set up an OnlyFans. How's that sound? Because no one needs to see this shit. Nobody needs to see the result of fucking, losing weight. Like, seriously, here. They really don't need to see that shit. But I could threaten it. So what I could do is threaten to have an OnlyFans, and that's a little bit of a reverse psychology for you. But, unfortunately, you will end up getting people with weird-ass fucking fetishes who want to give me money to take my clothes off, and I'm not doing that shit. Okay, yeah. Anyway. Well, I never say never, but it's highly unlikely. So anyway, so again, second time in 2 days, mostly because this was unfolding yesterday, sort of as I was talking about the other stuff. And yesterday was sort of more impromptu. This is more sort of on topic. And it is interesting because in the last 24 hours, Twitter's API has finally, at the free tier, has finally started to be restricted. Paul has a bot that he does for his work, and it has been actually running. So we've actually had a good test to see if it's actually still running, because it was actually slightly over the dev limits. And so, but that seems to have kicked in the last 24 hours. You've also seen Linda Yaccarino posting. So she's obviously on deck. She is pumped up. Obviously, I'm sitting here going, yeah, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. And I also want to see some, as much as they don't know who I am or care, my judgment on this is usually pretty spot on. And but I have actually noticed, this is related to Reddit. It is very much related to the blackout and what's going on, because I've noticed actually the second that sort of free API access finally actually stopped, and it could be a coincidence, my engagement has actually gone back to a normal percentage. Now, I'm not getting the views that I used to get. I used to get higher views on Twitter. My conversion rate, so think about it, it's a conversion rate. It's not really a conversion rate. I suppose it is. It's an engagement rate, engagement metric, which is that, a good percentage of people who see there's a percentage attached, right? So if you've got the total number of views, say it's like 100 views, you can expect maybe two or three likes out of 100. That's a really good conversion rate. Okay, 1% is a really good I'm saying conversion because that's it's engagement, right? But it's number of interactions and those sorts of things. But what I've actually noticed is that my view rates haven't actually changed, but my retweets, likes have gone up. Now, there's a different variable there with this, so I'm not going to sort of, there's some confounding variables here with this, which is that I have had Twitter Blue. I then, because I got the verification, I didn't see any change in my reach, but what I was actually doing was changing my profile photo to hide the blue check. But it seems that when you hide that blue check, you're also, obviously it stands to reason that you're still pending approval as well. So you don't get the juice. You get some of the features of Twitter Blue, like edit or longer tweets or whatever, but you are obviously still not given reach. Okay, so maybe that's one variable that I need to test. Okay. But in the last week, I've decided to just roll it, mostly because I just got sick of changing my fucking profile picture all the time and all the hassle. I just relented and went, fuck it. Think what you want about this blue check. I don't care anymore. But I also was going to be done with my subscription. But unfortunately, I got used to certain features. Now, this is a common thing. That people that this is, you'll be familiar with this, which is they create just enough friction and annoy you just enough to sort of incentivize you to buy that premium subscription, right? So but obviously reverting back to that, so people can tolerate that free experience, like, because you kind of go, oh yeah, that's the trade-off of all of that. But when you sort of downgrade and you find that you are limited, you actually do feel like pissed off. Like, I cannot go back to YouTube without premium. I cannot go back to Twitter Blue. Like, I just cannot do that anymore. I just physically can't. So I lasted about 7 hours, I think, before I decided to reinstate Twitter Blue, because I like the features, which was the edit feature and the longer tweets and not having to sort of edit and, or do threads or anything like that. So, I still find I had to relent and say, look, I find value in Twitter Blue. Yeah, the funny thing about cancelling your Twitter Blue subscription is that it got rid of my features, so the bold and the longer text and all editing and all of that sort of stuff, but it retained the check mark. And I've heard that Janelle, who is the friend of the show, as people say, actually said that she actually cancelled hers and her blue check stayed for. It didn't go away, and that seems to be a bug. But that's also clever marketing. If you've already got your blue check, it's probably sitting in different processes, and they've obviously got some sort of back end process problem for cancellations, and they go, oh yeah, no harm, no foul. People will think that person's verified. They are verified. So, but to an extent, that verification still sticks for a while, independent of your Twitter Blue subscription. I'd be interested to know how long for. Unfortunately, I just couldn't bear the friction for very long. But then I saw my reach improve. So there's a couple of different things there, which is that you've got obviously the Twitter Blue reach bonus. Yes, please. Paul's offering me a coffee. Don't go on the camera. I'm streaming. Yeah, make me another one in a different cup. So I got to top up. No, but so what you've got is obviously the blue check was reinstated, but it coincided with two different things. Like I said, that having the check mark, leaving the check mark there without making it hidden, and also the API closing. So I'm just going to, I'm going to see. It may also be that sometimes you just strike gold with a tweet, like the thing that, like, I haven't had engagement over, like, say 10 likes in 2 years. I used to go into the hundreds easy because, but I've also suddenly noticed people I've known from years ago, Twitter, suddenly like engaging with me again and replying, and people I'm like, oh, hi, you're still on Twitter. Yes. And that it's almost like I've just sort of suddenly being seen again. So it's going to be interesting to see, because I do have that previous video where I sort of showed you with the padlock, why that it is sort of backing up my hypothesis about why that padlock was effective, which was that But this is also why you shouldn't buy fake followers. It's the same reason why you should never pay for like followers, is because those followers will like suck your view count away, and you're given a specific percentage of your, that's all like mathematical. Like, you get a set number of views, and then based on the number of likes, it gets a little boost, and based on the number of retweets, it gets a boost. Based on the number of reports, now it's actually a massive amount. It's like negative 300%, which that's a change in the algorithm. But that's a whole other separate thing. Now, I'm explaining this because I want to sort of re-establish what I've been talking about with Twitter and explain what happened with Reddit, okay? Because they're not unrelated to each other. Because there's a bigger problem of astroturfing, bad actors, bots, API abusers. Some of those are endemic to tech, like, Facebook have for the most part started to deal with that stuff. I mean, obviously you still get like fake accounts on Instagram and scammers and all that stuff. It's always just a leak. It's always, that always exists. There's always a new exploit and a new fucking angle, and they're always trying to find different attack vectors. Like, that's a normal thing. But post Cambridge Analytica, I kind of want to talk a little bit, very briefly, about what an API is. Very quickly. I will try not to be too boring, but basically an API is an app. Fucking start with what it stands for, and I can't fucking remember. What does API stand for? Application Protocol fucking what? Application Programming Interface. That's right. I always fucking forget. We live in acronym land. It's funny, isn't it, Paul, when you live in fucking acronym land and then you forget what the acronym actually stands for because you're just always using the acronyms. That's just a corporate thing, isn't it? Application Programming Interface. Now, funnily enough, the what it does is in the title, even though I didn't know what the title was up until 3 seconds ago. I'm joking. But what an API does, okay, is that basically, you may have seen that the acronym thrown around a lot and what that is. But for the uninitiated, if let's say you've got an app on your phone that isn't the official Twitter app, okay, or a Facebook that's, not the official Facebook app, or, WhatsApp, or, those sorts of, third-party apps that are not made by the platform. It's not, that, okay. Or let's say, I'm explaining this terribly badly, but let's say you want to also run maybe scripts or automation. So like one basic use of the API is when you post a blog on WordPress, a blog post that will, without you having to hit share, like obviously you have a share button, but let's say you're like 150 million years old, you write a blog post. You then read that blog post, you copy the link to that blog post, you'd open a new tab, open Twitter, copy and paste that link into Twitter. That's a manual thing that you would have to do if you were a user using the platform. Obviously, I'm obviously, nobody does that unless, but you get what I'm saying. So you would have all of these manual steps in the process. But what an API can do is just go, when you post on WordPress, so WordPress has an API and Twitter has an API, and using code, using a script, you can connect those two together so that in the background, without you having to do anything, when you post, it will just auto share to Twitter. Okay. That's a very basic way of, using an API. Okay. But what you're doing is you're basically directly manipulating the database. Okay, so what it does is, rather than having to access the front end of a social platform like Twitter or Facebook or all of that, the thing that you see in the browser, that's called the front end. Okay, then you've got the back end, you've got the database. Okay, the API bypasses that front end. Okay. And the front end, I'm just practicing how to explain this for my course. So bear with me. I'm going to probably repeat myself a few times trying to explain it. And I may even edit this for the course. But if I explain it well enough, which I probably won't. But basically, so the API bypasses that front end that you see in your browser, and it just goes straight to the database. It calls from that database, like information, okay? Like your account username and your login credentials and all that sort of stuff, okay? And then it posts to that database without you having to like manipulate or use the front end of the website, okay? So that's a very basic, very confusing for a very basic explanation, very convoluted way of making something fucking harder to understand. Good job, Tate. Thank you. Thank you for my coffee. No, okay. So basically what you need to understand is that now with the views manipulation, obviously the way views are counted are through the front end because most of the views are run with scripts. Okay, so that front end that you see in your browser on Facebook or Twitter, the actual design and front end and all that sort of stuff, right? That's called the interface. Most of the scripts that measure views, okay, that runs via the front end. Okay, so what you've got there is that those scripts run by the front end. So with the API, okay, now this is the thing I need to verify because it's not clear. But with an API, you're not viewing the tweet per se, okay? You are not actually, that's why, you're not actually viewing, you're bypassing that front end thing that measures view count, okay? So that's why you'll see that discrepancy between, all these discrepancies with views and likes and all that sort of stuff because the view count is not, let's say like if there's a like and the views and the likes are sort of out of kilter, like there's more likes than there are views, that's a very good sign that they are sort of bypassing that front end, okay, which is what you see as a web page on Twitter or in the app. And it sort of ticks over as a view. So every time you refresh the page, it counts as a view. Now, the API bypasses that, but you can manipulate the database directly to like a tweet or retweet or, follow, unfollow people. You can, do some basic things. Now, what you can do with the API. Now, this is very important because it is related to the Reddit Blackout. And you sort of need to see how these two things are linked together. Now, Matt's here. So Matt's going to think that I'm telling people to suck eggs here. But I'm just trying to find ways to explain this. And I will find my analogies as I go. It's a series of tubes that are direct to the database. Yes. Thank you, Matt. It is a series of tubes where you use, I'm really trying to explain this like people who don't even understand, the basics, like things, because I've realized that there's things that are just not obvious, like even just talking about something like Reddit, it's like, what's Reddit? What's an API? Some of those things. So anyway, I'm going to try and skip over it as quickly as I can. But so what you need to understand is that every time you refresh your browser or something like that, or you interact or click, most of that is done via that front end interface, whether it is the app or in the browser. In Facebook, that's one and the same. With Twitter, I think it's one and the same. I'm not clear. I'm not sure, but they're moving to it. Anyway, side point. So no, do that because it breaks the ice and keeps me focused. As long as it's not, like people, you're fun. People arguing with me in the chat gets me fucking rattled. But anyway, fucking why'd you open, dickhead? Something's opening. Hang on, give me a sec. A whole bunch of apps just suddenly started opening. Hang on. That's probably what's causing these fucking. Let me just quit. It may lag for a minute while I close some stuff. Hang on. Some stuff just suddenly opened. I don't know why. It's just a piece of shit computer, that's all. All right. So I've turned that off. Okay. So it's Windows. Probably have a virus. It's probably, honestly, that's a whole other side thing where, oh my gosh, I bought my daughter a Lenovo laptop, gosh, how old was she? This was when she was like, God, she was like 8 or 9. And I just bought her like one of those cheap sort of, those little Lenovo books, the IdeaPad type things. And she came in tears because I bought it for her for Christmas, and she had Windows. And the first thing she went and did, because she's used to using like she was using Macs and somewhat controlled interfaces, she went and used some of those dodgy streaming video things to watch videos, and it just fucking littered her with like malware, and like it absolutely just crippled her computer, and I had to reinstall it, and she was absolutely devastated. And I was just like, oh, welcome to Windows. I actually visited the Pirate Bay last week and I forgot to put on a fucking thing. It's a very good chance that that's what's going on. Anyway, I have to fix that too now. Just another fucking thing. Anyway, so you need to understand sort of why the API is important. Okay, so the API, because it has direct access to the database, and you can, so in the early days with Facebook, okay, let's think about Facebook for a second. So in the early days of Facebook, the way that the API worked was that it was a treasure trove for people to sort of, log in to the database via the API and sort of find out who, who was friends, what their user data was, friends of friends, all that sort of behavioral data. You can actually get that quite easily via the API, right? So the big thing, the big turning point with Facebook was that off the back of sort of the open source movement, off the back of these ideals of share and share alike, everyone does the right thing, we trust everyone, blah, 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 blah. That was something that I think that we were too idealistic on. And we, I still think maybe it's just par for the course. But what the big change with Facebook was that we were all posting on there, but in the background you had advertising agencies, businesses, all of those sorts of, companies, marketers, people like me. You could actually just download. You could use the API to just download spreadsheets of people's details and email addresses, because it was pretty much like you could just, if you had a developer account, you could just do that because it was trust, it was built on trust and people sort of doing the right thing. Naive as fuck. And obviously I'm skimming over the technical details because obviously, you can't just log in and get everyone's personal information. But if you're savvy enough, obviously that was fairly trivial to accomplish. And if you could, you just set up set up an application and you can, request access. Obviously, you authenticate it, right? So the app requests access to your account. That's why when you actually log in with Facebook and you had that allow and deny, when you log in with Google and it says they'd like to have this information, those pop-ups were only, they weren't even introduced until later in Facebook's life, right? But that was by necessity because users were, you had to have an explicit opt-in. Now, so the use of the API with Facebook famously was misused with Cambridge Analytica. Now, what Cambridge Analytica did, and this is why, it kind of caught everyone off guard to an extent, which was that it was foreseeable for most people. For me, I was kind of like, that seems like it's going to be misused. But I just assumed that everyone knew that and that they would have policies in place. Again, you trust that people are going to do. You don't necessarily say something early because you go, okay, well, they probably got it handled. I'm sure there's they got their cybersecurity in order. I'm sure that they're grown-ups and they're smart. I'm sure they know what they're doing. But in some cases, these guys didn't know. In some they did and just ignored it and sort of, made that trade-off and decided to risk those things for the sake of, But, so Cambridge Analytica post-Trump was a massive turning point for Facebook because basically what Cambridge Analytica did was if you remember all these people, it's like now they've gotten more sophisticated. Not less sophisticated actually, which is that you just make anyway, I'll talk about that in a second. But why you shouldn't answer fucking behavioral questions on Facebook and these things because they're just extracting shit from you. It's just a new way of doing it via comments rather than via quizzes and stuff because they crack down on that stuff. But anyway, so but what Cambridge Analytica did was that they, much like those BuzzFeed quizzes, and BuzzFeed sold this data too, but Cambridge Analytica were on the hook for basically using that API to get you to do quizzes. Okay, so what they would do is get you to do BuzzFeed quizzes, which potato are you, which variety of Muppet are you, which fucking this are you, and and they would just build those databases on people, and then what they would do is use Facebook's targeting. Okay, so again, you need to understand. This would require a fairly intensive course in Facebook ads, which I'm not going to do. I can do that at some point. But feel free to just watch any. It's on the Facebook Help Center. You can access that stuff. But basically, what you can do is target people based on like behavioral things. Now, when I was training, this is when I was training in early Facebook ads. Like I actually was a certified Facebook ad thing. I used to like coach and train, and I was very early in training people on how to properly like do that persona work and that behavioral work and get into the mind of your customer. And training small business how to do that and how to think like how to do this in a smart way and how to target well. That was something that I did quite a lot of training in. It was part of my consulting stuff. But yeah, I was, before. See, that's the funny thing about like Google and Facebook, and like, are you AdWords certified? I was like, I was AdWords certified before you could get AdWords certified. Are you like a Google? It's like, I don't need to do a course in Google SEO because I was there and I did it and I taught that shit. It's like, but I had like all these accreditations and shit, but it's not difficult to understand. Anyway, that was a big part of my bread and butter. But there's what you want to do and what you have to do, and training people in how to do Facebook ads was a big part of that tedious data, but the tedious stuff. But anyway, but what Cambridge Analytica did was that they got you to answer questions that were sort of left of center, but based on them being left, like, you can actually, I think one of the things that people don't understand is that people are surprisingly a lot more predictable than you think if you do a little bit of persona work. If you sit down and go, okay, you can extrapolate an awful lot about a person, right, based on certain heuristics and patterns, and like you can tell a lot about someone by the kind of pages that they like. So there's I've said this before, there's a big difference between but comedians is a big one. Okay, so asking who your favorite comedian is, I can tell you a lot about somebody based on who their favorite comedians are. I can tell you a lot about someone based on who their favorite band is and who their favorite musician is. I can extrapolate a lot out of people through pop culture, okay, through what kind of TV shows they like, because people like meets like, and you can sort of go, okay, people that like Ricky Gervais are very different to people who like Doug Stanhope. There may be overlaps, of course, if you just but Jerry Seinfeld, Doug Stanhope, they're kind of there may be a Venn diagram there, but they're pretty distinct audiences, right? So but if you can like extract like a lot of those things, so you like The Simpsons and you like Doug Stanhope and you like Friends and you watch documentaries, and they can kind of extrapolate sort of a lot of different personality traits based on sort of these things and what is likely to convert you. Okay, so the reason that you like, let's say, okay, I like Ben Folds, big fan of Ben Folds. I like Ben Folds because of a certain, he spoke to me in a certain way, as a sort of outsider, geeky, nerdy, fucking spurgy, like, intense kind of person who isn't good at communicating feelings, but they can do it in a song, and, that kind of thing. Like there's a kind of that's the, you can extrapolate why people like the way that they like, who they like. Okay. Now, but if you can extract that information, right, from people, you can, again, like I said, you can learn a lot about them. Okay, the food they eat, the people they hang out with. There's just like decades and decades of psychology studies that experiment on this type of stuff. So they just have that sort of wealth of knowledge. Now, so Cambridge Analytica, obviously, if you were around in the early days of Facebook, now I am getting to Reddit. I need to tell you the sort of the way that this develops, because the way I feel about the Reddit blackout is different to the way I feel about the Twitter blackout, but it's also because they're different cases. But I need to talk about the whole thing, and it may take a bit longer. Bear with me. But this is information that I'm putting out there. It's not necessarily, I've accepted the fact that, I'm not going to really grow. So I'm just going to say what I need to say and hope that it, I'll turn the polished stuff into the structured course and, so I'm setting up automation so that I can basically get all of my videos transcribed. And there's an app, there's a browser plugin where you can take your YouTube video, take the transcript, and automatically transcribe it, and then make it into like dot points and stuff, and really summarize the guts of the video. So I'm hoping that I can extract some of that a lot more quickly and turn like that into and I can reshoot or script and, things that are a bit more tight for the, like this is top of funnel shit. This is just hanging out and riffing stuff, right? Not that. So anyway, so basically, so with Cambridge Analytica, the reason why that was so controversial at the time was because up until then, this whole idea of the API and nerds being nerds and nerds doing the right thing, I think it was a blind spot, and I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. But it caught a lot of people by surprise in like I was talking about hindsight bias yesterday, where we're like, fuck, in retrospect, that was a really dumb idea to make that open like that. Like that seems obvious now. That, like we go, oh, fuck. And that's the thing about, like, I think working in, like, anything with cybersecurity is that it always seems fucking like it was common sense in hindsight, because they just found a vulnerability and you go, oh, fuck. Okay, yeah, oh, yeah, the roof. Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Like that's how sort of scammers and bad guys work. You're always keeping sort of trying to keep one step ahead of them because, quite nimble fucks. Okay. If you've got no conscience, but anyway. So, but the turning point for Cambridge Analytica, the reason why that was important and why I have to emphasize it was because that was a turning point for turning not the pages that so up until then it was like fairly benign. So it was like common wisdom. Okay, well, not common wisdom, but anyone who was good at Facebook marketing would do this persona work where they'd write a persona up. They'd go, okay, who's your ideal customer? And you do the demographics, but the sociographics, this is called sociographics and psychographics. You would do some, more intense psychological work around that sort of imaginary sort of, amalgam character, it's called a persona. Kind of like an archetype of sorts, right? Where you are building a imaginary person, but usually thinking of a real person, but, an imaginary person, and you sort of do the name and their job and their pain points. What's their pain? What's their struggle? Let's dive in a little bit more into not just demographics, but also, what are their motivations? What's their pain? What does their day look like? You can go really deep into that. So if you're doing like this is called journey mapping, and if you, an experience mapping, there's lots of different ways. But if you're doing an experience map, for example, okay, what you want to do is the more parts of that sort of thing that you map out, those are opportunities to sort of target that person in that moment. So let's say, in the morning, I wake up and, I have a coffee. Okay. I'm thinking, what are my thought processes? Oh, fuck. What am I thinking? What's my life look like that makes me think, oh, fuck, am I getting out of bed grumpy? Am I getting out of bed happy? Am I getting up positive? Am I getting up negative? How do I feel? What music am I listening to? You can go really granular with this. Now, the thing is that before Facebook, this was gold information. This was stuff that advertisers desperately wanted about us because they wanted to be able to manipulate our emotions to get us to buy more stuff. Like, this is absolute gold. Also fucking really cool and interesting, because some of the work that you do with this is actually really interesting. If this was the win-win that was sold, which was that when we say win-win, I talk about this all the time. This thing that the branded content and native advertising, it was sold as a good thing, because what it was is when you're talking about contextualized experiences, okay, or right place, right time, which is that If you are good at what you do and you have sufficient empathy for your customer, okay, yes, it's a commodified empathy, but it is an empathy exercise. But your job is to empathize with that customer, go deep into their pain, okay, and go, all right, are they tired? Are they loaded? Blah, blah, blah. How can I reach them and help them? Now, it was naive, right? Because obviously that means that there's going to be bad guys who don't just persuade, but they manipulate, okay? That is the line between, say, something like advertising and propaganda is one is, offering you something, and persuading you and helping you and all of that sort of stuff. The other is manipulating you, okay, and not necessarily, being transparent about that. The early days of Facebook with this API was that, it links to the API, the value proposition of Facebook was that, for advertisers, which was that advertisers could reach you at more of these touch points, okay? More of these points in that map. So rather than just waiting for you to go to bed, waiting for you to watch TV in the evening, which traditional advertising was, or radio, which is that window when you're driving to work, they'd have to try and guess, what time your commute was from sort of, 6:30 to, because there's a vast difference in sort of radio ads between, 4 and 5 a.m. and 7 and 8. Like that's vastly more expensive because you've got obviously you've got a tradie audience up at that time of the day versus, your professionals. They're very different segments, okay? But then you've also got ads in late night and talk back and, all those sorts of things. So you think about the types of ads that you get at certain times of the day. That was the limitation of traditional advertising. What Facebook unlocked, and I'm taking the time to explain this also because I am trying to produce stuff for my fucking course. So if it gets something of value out of it here, then I don't have to do it again. But what Facebook offered was more touch points. So like I said, rather than having to wait until you were in the car between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, or rather than waiting for you to be watching the evening news or reading the paper or, you coming to them, what they could do is come to you in a voice that relates to you with products that you want. That was the key point. Products that you wanted with your consent. And that was another sort of blind spot, which was that, user consent. And you kind of went, all right, well, everyone wins because consumer gets what they want or desire. Okay. And the advertiser gets to, sell them direct and give them something that they want. Now, that was that was sort of the goal. That was the sort of the big lie, and it was naive and all that sort of stuff. Okay. Because unfortunately, like I've talked about this before, which is in tech, we tend to be utopian. It was a blind spot for me. Like it's one of those things that in retrospect seems dumb and naive. But basically, we're going to give the other value proposition was that advertising was, cents per impression versus, so to book a radio ad back in those days, was tens of thousands of dollars for a, standard fucking 15-second slot, like that would run, it could run into the hundreds of thousands depending on where you were doing it. And TV even more than that, right? Because then you've got all that budget. But what you got was that advertising became accessible to small businesses. So you could be, like I talked about in the last stream, you could be a solo operator and you could, boost a post, or you could spend, a couple of bucks. And if you were really good at your targeting, the better you were at it was kind of merit-based advertising really, because the better you are at your targeting and the more compelling your content, you could get away with spending, $5, $10, $20 for an ad campaign, if you could do everything in-house. Like if you were really smart, you could do that, right? If you really understood how organic marketing worked, you could, and then boosting after that to sort of give it another boost and all those sorts of things, you could really own that, right? But then, so basically what Facebook did for that was offer, so that, things like the game. So, Farmville, Candy Crush, some of those early, like those Kinga games, even before that, but they had apps. Okay. So you could build an app on top of Facebook. Like the whole spirit of all of like social media has always been that spirit of open source. It just kind of it was just naive and it got away from us. And but basically, you know, they had an API. So an API was for developers to turn around and build an app on top of, you know, their platform. Okay. Now a platform is different to an app. A platform provides, you know, like support for other apps, or like an ecosystem, and an app obviously is just the, you know, the actual application on your phone, for example. Right. It's obviously a bit more technical than that, but that's the, you know, rough difference. But basically, so what they did was the value for advertisers, you see where this sort of intersects a little bit. So Facebook were basically like, well, people are using this stuff. They're sharing. What you should do is advertise in a, you know, like I was always like, well, you know, you need to people will use ad blockers, so you need to be, they you know, you need to have their consent, but also the way that you again, anyway, I've sort of digressed for a second. Sorry about that. I was trying to decide whether I go down that rabbit hole, but I'm not going to. But basically, you know, they basically said, well, here you go, advertisers. These guys are having conversations. Now, what we'll do is we'll allow you and developers and all of those other, you know, third-party apps. We want to build a platform. We want to build an ecosystem built on an API where you can then access that data, so that you know, that behavioral data, because you can then target people better and give them better ads. Okay. So it was really sold as a win-win. Now, the problem is that bad guys also had access to the API, and what they could do was do unethical stuff and unethical advertising. Okay. Which was, I mean, yes, I know it sounds like a tautology, but it's not. Unethical advertising, but you know, there is actually a line, a defined line, but there are actually standards there, okay, and both legal and ethical in the industry, believe it or not. But where this got away was that everyone got sort of hungry on the data, you know, they got greedy on the data for a start, but also there was this blind spot, which was that through, like, you know, at Cambridge Analytica basically had everyone just asking questions and doing quizzes and all that sort of stuff. They would make things into games and quizzes, and they basically built this app. And what it did was it made you fill out this thing. It was like, share it with your friends. You know, oh, what's that? Who's your like celebrity boyfriend? That sort of shit. Remember that? And so you would answer a few questions, and what it would do is that would scrape not only take your answers, okay, across all those quizzes, but it would match it with your behavioral data. And they basically just vacuumed all of everyone's data. But then what they did there was they're called, you know, sort of, you can create a custom audience in Facebook, and they could actually target you based on like your interests and those things, and really get granular and manipulate you, not just sort of sell you fucking shoes or whatever. From which there was a funny thing, actually. There was a funny experiment where one guy fucked with I think it was his roommate or his friend. Where his friend this was around 2010, because I actually thought of doing this campaign, and just as I was about to start, they shut this down because this guy had already beat me to the punch. But I think it was 2011, I think. It was after the iPad thing, because I was fucking shit stirring, and I wanted to, you know, I was doing another thing. But I had this idea that what you could do is sort of build a persona for your ideal date. And what you could do is create ads and run ads that sort of, you know, target a specific group of people, and just sort of sell yourself as a product in the fucking Facebook ads. And it just, again, you think about it and you go, but you just don't make the leap to bad guys, because, you know, we were too, it was a blind spot. We're just too utopian. We were like, yeah, oh yeah, fuck, okay. Yeah, I can see how they did that. You know, yes, there were some things where they were alerted to the risk, but when you're in business, and especially in startups and all that sort of stuff, there's a lot of sort of trade-offs, you know, weighing risk, going, oh, okay, risk versus benefit, Okay, do we want to fucking do this? But, and that's a problem in tech where they sort of full steam ahead without really thinking it through. And they kind of have a she'll be right sort of, we'll fix it when we get there kind of thing. It's like failing upwards. What is it? Move fast and break things, right? That's what Zuckerberg has said before. So basically, yeah, no, it's like one hot single Facebook user in your area. That would be, and like just, but you could also, this guy actually, oh, that's right. This guy actually fucked with his housemate because he actually made a custom audience with just his mate's email address. So you could, there was a point, there was a loophole in that where you could actually target one person with an ad designed specifically for them. And he basically, I need to find that, but I remember basically he was giving this guy targeted ads to scare the shit out of him, right? Which is pretty funny. But you can see how like that would sort of extrapolate sort of out into Twitter now, which is that you could easily just have an AI bot targeting a specific person to manipulate and fuck with them if they were sort of in any way a threat or you were pissed off with them or whatever. It's not a big leap to see how sort of it ended there. But yeah, there was this whole thing. I can't remember where it was, but yeah, it was funny at the time. But Facebook promptly closed that, and they made it so that you had to have, I think it was a minimum, don't quote me, it was a minimum of 100, I think it was, on that email list, right? Before you could you had to target people in the aggregate, not in the specific, because obviously, but then they figured out that if you cross-reference enough things, and if you have a list of things that you're, so this is the thing about with data, which is you might think, oh, well, who cares if I like The Simpsons? Who cares if I like Ricky Gervais? Who cares? Like that's all just fairly benign, and you think that that's fairly anonymous. But the thing about that, it's a probability thing based on okay? So you liking The Simpsons and Ricky Gervais, that's not really a mystery, okay? But you liking Simpsons, Ricky Gervais, and classical music and living within 5 kilometers of a certain location, well, if you like a niche band or a small, band or an indie band, you're probably the only one within, say, 10 kilometers of that location. So they can use location data. They can use these things. You pretty quickly can be identified, based on just, that sort of geolocation data plus your behavioral data, even though, yes, when they say data is in the aggregate, that's what they mean, which is that it's like it's anonymous in the aggregate, okay, which is, yes, they use it to, obviously, like, who gives a fuck? Like, I don't care if anyone serves me ads based on the fact that I'm a Simpsons fan or that I, whatever, that's cool. But what happened is that they can actually identify you by, you put enough variables in, eventually you can zero in on like one person. Probably, I think someone said it takes about 6 to actually narrow you down to like the nearest, if they know your rough state, okay, and they'll be able to identify you with a few cross references, right? So that's what you got to understand. So Cambridge Analytica started to weaponize that. Okay, now that was the first, like, really. I mean, there's been other ones, but this was one of the most prominent, famous, very heavy political, with pretty serious political consequences. That was one of those first real conversations about sort of the dark side of this sort of API access. So this has been going on since, I think, what was that, 2017? Don't quote me, I can't remember. I can't remember the dates, I haven't got that written down. This was sort of, I didn't expect to go this deep, but I thought, fuck it, let's do that. Wish novelty adult toys. Oh my God. Don't talk about, and actually Wish is a really good example of that on steroids, which is that got sort of became programmatic and dynamic, which was, that was very strange, especially if you're somebody who, has a weird, eclectic Facebook thing, you kind of end up with some weird shit. But anyway, but there used to be that thing where, Facebook could tell you were pregnant before you were pregnant. Right, that was a thing because what you based on what you were looking at. Okay, they could basically predict that you didn't know you were pregnant, but they did. Right, that's the. But anyway, so Cambridge Analytica became able to predict, behaviour, because they had that cross-reference data. But, again, we're more predictable than you think. We're more, we're more habitual. If you ever downloaded your data from Google and it showed your movements, like your location, it will show you that you move pretty much within the same, 3 or 4 fucking things all day, every day. You move in like very predictable, routine ways. And that's what obviously stalkers fucking try to track that shit, but also advertisers and stuff, right? Because of this contextual advertising, which was sold as a win-win for the users, right? But but obviously that could be used for nefarious purposes, and that was that first thing. So really, okay, I know that it's taken me a while to get to Reddit. I'm not even like started yet, but I will. Is that you needed to understand that this has been an ongoing problem, okay? I've talked about the Twitter API before. I've talked about the Twitter API in terms of the way that platform manipulation is performed via Twitter. So Facebook sort of have plugged the holes in that regard. You had a few, like this is where Russiagate became fucking, an overblown thing. Yeah, they fucked around, but it wasn't that much, right? It had a negligible impact on people's voting, okay? But again, once we found out about Cambridge Analytica, guess what the bad guys did? They went, okay, well, we can do this way, but we can do it in a way that a more creative way. I've talked about cats against Trump. I've talked about all these things at length in my previous videos. I've talked about all of these strategies, right, and all the tactics. But what happened there was that obviously bad guys are pretty fucking adaptive. So basically, when you fill out a quiz, you're not just and I've talked about acronym, which is where Hillary Clinton campaign did exactly this. They literally write that on their all these Democratic PACs. They actually do this, which is that they have you fill out a quiz and then they send you partisan content to try and nudge you away from Trump and nudge you away from whatever they want. Now, they're doing that, but everyone can do that. That's a practice. And that's why I've sort of said that across the board, these unethical practices and micro-targeting and those sorts of things are the thing that need to be addressed and criminalized, okay, depending on the, obviously you can scale from misdemeanor to fucking, something like, but anyway. But that's where, there was a gap in law and a gap in all those things because we only learn as we go along. It's like we didn't know. But now, even though those quizzes have sort of faded away, okay, what I see is there's these new ways of doing it, which is getting you to comment with certain things, right? They use memes, they use all sorts of things, right, to honeypot you so that they can, because via the API, you can still access the comments on your post. Do you see how it works? But they shut off the access to the data via the API. So the next thing they do is just say, well, what can we access? Comments. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll ask a question and have people answer the question, okay, using polls or using whatever. So this is why you should never fill out a LinkedIn poll or anything like that, right? Now, Twitter's a bit different. Like, again, the horse is bolted, but I'm just saying, like, this is something that like it's endemic. Now, it's important that I went through that history because we have to go back that far to Cambridge Analytica to go, well, you know what? In retrospect, we were too idealistic. Okay. In retrospect, giving everyone access to user data was a mistake. Now, I know people go, no shit, Sherlock. I get it, okay? But I can tell you right now that most people didn't think it was a big deal. I remember having this, I was one of the early critics, and I remember having a conversation with a friend who, worked at a major tech company, and I said, I think this is bordering on unethical. She's like, no, but we're giving people what they want. There's no problem. And that was the level of thought that she put into it. She's like, well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm helping them. That's the level of thought that a lot of people were putting into it, which is that they're just, because they're using the data in an ethical way, they just assume that everyone else is, okay? And this was, again, it was just a blind spot. Like, just talking to everyone, they thought that they bought that Kool-Aid like I was talking about, which was that you give them what they want. It's an honest transaction. This is, it's unethical adjacent, Bazza said. Yeah, hi, Bazza. But yeah, it was a real grey area. And it was a grey area that was, like in marketing, you've got white hat and black hat, or hacking, you've got white hat and black hat. This sit firmly not in black hat. It was firmly in the, EF, almost white grey. Okay. Like it was, if you're in advertising. But if you're like a bad political actor, okay, depending on, like who you are and your scruples and your willingness to be, to do this, which was, it firms very much in the dark grey to sort of black hat, right? But it's, but that was the thing, which is that it's a full range, and there's still people today, like, and this is the thing that I find really, really interesting from my own work, which was that I thought that just merely putting my hand up and going, you know what, like this can be used in this way. We have a problem with dark patterns. We have a problem with dark, this needs to be, black hat. We need to address black hat stuff. We need to address unethical practices. I've talked about that at length. But a lot of these people don't see it as unethical. They think that they're helping, and even the people, the political operatives, that's the problem of, like, I think political advertising in general, is that it also uses activists. And this is why I think that the Trump campaign was a turning point too, because people were so mobilized and radicalized on both sides, that somehow seem to agree on everything. They're sort of very much polarized. But what that did was that also they lean into their righteousness. Okay, so there's a thing where there's, in propaganda, you've got messaging, okay, and then you've got people who are like, that's propaganda. But then you've got people who go, well, to fight that propaganda, we need to do counter messaging. But that's not unethical, because we're the good guys and we are saving those people from that propaganda. Do you see how it works? And unfortunately, this is why we're all caught in the crossfire of this fucking culture war, because that's all they can fucking fight on, because they agree on everything else. Is that, we're caught in this crossfire because what was I going to say? Can't remember. But we're caught, that polarization basically means people felt righteous in these things, which is they go, well, we're helping people. I've seen that, where they go, no, I'm giving them what they want. It's for their own good. I want to save them from being radicalized into the alt-right. I want to be, save them from themselves and all that. This comes from that elite sort of looking down on people, thinking people are stupid, all that sort of stuff. There's a whole level of political complexity there as well. I'm not going to go down that fucking rabbit hole, because it's already taken me too long to get here. But, what you've got is a perfect storm here of open API access, agencies who are motivated by money and paid per click and paid per engagement, all that sort of stuff. But they also feel like they're doing the right thing. They feel like they're saving the world. They feel like they're saving the world from Nazis. And these guys feel like they're saving the fucking world from the trans and the fucking woke ideology and all that shit. They feel like, there's all these people that feel like they're doing the fucking righteous thing, and they're all radicalized and they've all got access, and they're all just trying to, they're all justifying sort of platform manipulation, because the ends justifies the means in all of it, okay? And that's the thing that I've seen right through, which is I go, well, no, this is a problem. API access, where you can directly access these things. You should not have the right to people's data like this. You should not be allowed to use it. If you have access to it, you should not be able to use it, or something. There needs to be silos or ways of controlling information, much like you do with, classified information, all those things. You got to have processes in place that sort of, protect from these things, right? But that was a problem that was sort of exposed obviously Obama campaign, letter of engagement in 2009, that was sort of the first real sort of use of this, but they got more and more sophisticated as time went on, and turned this stuff all into just a fundraising funnel for radicalized people to justified all of it, because they were fighting the bad guy, they were fighting the enemy, they were all radical, they're all in a fucking death cult, and everyone's, and we're all caught in the fucking crossfire, okay? But But you see that warfare sort of also translated over to places like Twitter. So the Twitter files. So that's an API abuse. Again, the bots, the bots that are just sort of mass reporting you or, for whatever reason. Again, like I've said before, this stuff is not just about sophisticated. Everything from an individual marketer with, $10 with and able to just buy some likes, get some like growth shit on Fiverr. It's trivial to do this stuff, okay? And that sort of always having to stay on top of that. But it's trivial, it's cheap, and it is unethical. Now, unfortunately, you had a whole bunch of people sort of fooling themselves into thinking that they were doing the right thing and that they were sort of saving the world from the fucking Nazis or the wokes or whatever the fuck, okay? But you have to remember that everyone from a kid living in his basement who's just trollololling his fucking mates to, the CIA, all the way up through for corporations, through everything. It's a set of tactics, okay, that are universal, which was that the ability to pull your data via the API, post to it via the API, bypass, the application so that, you can't necessarily measure it like, you can, anyway. But by, from all accounts I've heard that Twitter's API, is not, they don't keep a lot of really they didn't keep a lot of logs on sort of who was accessing the fire hose and that sort of stuff, right? So they had to, again, it was all built on trust, right? So I trained my chatbot on 1,000 hours of Jesus bot chats. You won't believe what happened next. And that was that real, clickbait. That's what BuzzFeed really perfected, was those clickbait titles that would get you to click, that get you to fill out reactions. And then Facebook started measuring those emotions, and that sort of cat got out of the bag, and we sort of ended up here, okay? But the problem, the root cause of all of this was the fact that we as an industry got it wrong, which was open source, share and share alike, make everything open, build on top of their API that is free, that is unlimited, that is public, and anyone can do. And unfortunately, that was one of those, move fast and break things. It meant well. I think a lot we should change that phrase to meant well, broke things, because that was really kind of what happened there, which was they went, fuck, there's some unintended consequences here. And, oh my God, developers might do the wrong thing. Now, it was interesting actually, because I watched Jack Dorsey talking to Breaking Points about the Twitter files, and he actually gave me some insight into that, because he still truly believes that more people will do good than people will do bad, and that he still absolutely believes in open source. He absolutely believes in transparency. And I think that he is tremendously fucking naive. Okay. I think that he just really doesn't fucking get it. Unfortunately, he's fighting a good fight, but I think he's fighting the wrong one. And I think that he is wrong. And unfortunately, I think he's still trying to, I think I talked about this. When was it? The Twitter thing where it's like, I've been hanging on to something that no longer exists. RIP the internet. I realized that with my book, the reason why I've been sort of stalling on it, and I couldn't quite find the end, like the book, the sort of intro and the end. Like I've got an intro, but it's not quite there. And like, where do you place it in time? And I realized very quickly that throughout those chapters, I'm not writing a story. That's I'm actually writing an obituary or a eulogy for the internet that was. And what I was actually realizing that I've been trying to do for the last few years is actually grieve that and sort of go back and remember all of those good times and all of the good stuff, and turn it into a sort of but I actually realized, ironically, calling it dying by the sword, the clue was there all along, but there was that point where I was still desperately clinging to an internet that had gone, that no longer existed. And I think that's where Jack hasn't really sort of come to that conclusion yet. He still thinks that it can be, he still thinks that can be salvaged, and maybe it can, but I don't think it can. But yeah. So Dorsey quite clearly found himself well over his head, and I feel for him because I kind of relate. I feel the same way. I feel sad that he doesn't appear to have learnt much. But he tends to be pro Musk. He I don't know. Anyway, that's a whole other fucking thing. But anyway, I'm trying to talk about Reddit. So, but yes, you are correct. And what was I going to say? Yeah. So the core problem here is API access. Okay, it's always been the problem. Tech got that wrong. Okay. Now, unfortunately, there's also a whole culture. Okay. Unfortunately, where this has been offered. It has been offered, it's sort of a cornerstone of the internet. It's a foundational, principle, I suppose, of building these platforms in good faith, which is that you would have an API. Even I've said this. Remember, I've said this repeatedly the last few streams about Substack, where I'm like, they don't have an API. Fuck them. I want to be able to access via the API. That's sort of a given, okay? And you understand, like it's like just a default. And I've had to rethink that too. Like it's like, well, I've got lots of other reasons why, but that's not really a valid reason anymore, because I think that we should have closed those APIs and they should never have been open in the first place. Okay, now we should have had the benefit of foresight and wisdom to not make them as accessible as they were. But unfortunately, again, tech bros, naive, utopian, can't help that, right? I tend to not. I'm one of those people that's like, well, it is what it is. You got to move forward and find a solution. There's no point fucking, lamenting over what was or what should have been, right? But this was an error that was made years ago. It was something that was naive, and it was something that, much like, I'm going to write all my secrets on the internet. Like no one will find it there. Like that was a thing. That was a real phenomena. I shared things on the internet because I didn't want people to find out. This was the shift. This was like, and to hear that said today sounds absolutely absurd. Okay. But that was the level of trust that we had in each other and the community we were trying to build, right? And that's the thing that Jack's still clinging to, is that sort of utopian sort of, anarcho-capitalist utopian view of humans, which unfortunately we do not live in that world. And we need systems and processes and, governance and so, all these things, like I've said before, 90% of our fucking laws deal with the 10% of fuckwits, okay? That most people would try to do the right thing, and that's, anyway. So, but that API access was sort of offered free, and it's kind of like trying to put things back in Pandora's box after you've opened the fucking thing. Okay, so Reddit Blackout. Now, what you need to know about Reddit is that Reddit is unique as a platform, in the sense that it's mods do a lot of free work for Reddit. Okay, now Facebook didn't initially have this. They had groups and stuff, but the idea of sort of a admin. Well, okay, this actually. Okay, let me go back. Let me circle my brain back. This actually goes back to AOL, believe it or not. Like as far back as like AOL.com in like the 90s, there was actually a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit against AOL, where the people who would set up a community and moderate a chat room, that became like a full-time volunteer position, and AOL made a fuck ton of money, and people were doing a lot of volunteer work, running these communities, bringing traffic to AOL. Obviously, ads were being served. They were selling that ad space, all those sorts of things. So the AOL portal, if you were running a community on AOL or Usenet or whatever, you were doing moderator work. So that was something that was considered it built the internet. Like those communities built the internet. I've talked about this in my blog post about was it Asterisk? I think article that I've shared recently. That was a big part of how I started, which was that online forums and then becoming good at community moderator and everyone coming to me with their shit. But it became a job. Now, thankfully, we negotiated so that I got a little bit of money, for my time. But, that was the webmaster. The webmaster was everything. The webmaster would, do the website, run the community, all of that sort of stuff and moderate. Some were paid, but a lot of them were volunteers. Now, that landmark case in the 90s, AOL mods actually took AOL to court and actually, I think, ultimately settled. I can't remember. It took a long time. I can't remember the exact dates, but, they ended up sort of settling that thing, winning that thing for like $15 million. So there is actually like legal precedent around this stuff, right? There is actually legal precedent around volunteer work. And this is where of moderators and admins and stuff. So where Reddit is unique is that it goes all the way back to Dig, okay? So dig.com was a social bookmarking site. And that basically imploded on itself for various reasons so basically they tried to do, so this is, okay, there's too much internet history here. I have to bite this off in small chunks and I'm obviously glossing over a lot of fucking history right now, okay? But, so you had Dig, okay, which was basically, you'd save things, you'd bookmark things. It was like a social bookmarking. So you could clip it to Dig. It would say there, your friends could see it, you could share it, or you could keep it, whatever. It became a social bookmarking. Then you started to have that upvoting and downvoting and all that sort of stuff. Now, Kevin Rose, okay, was the owner of Dig, or the founder of Dig. I remember he was a host on G4 TV. That's how fucking specific my knowledge goes. And but he was also the founder of Dig. So he was on, remember G4 TV? Anyway, fucking hell. But Leo Laporte used to be on that as well. No, I haven't missed it yet. I haven't missed that yet. I'm getting there. That was funny. I'm still at Dig, okay? So Kevin, this is the fatal mistake, okay? Which is, okay, golden rule of product design, golden rule of user experience. Think about eBay. What is it? Everybody. Don't make changes. The users will revolt. Now, talked about the eBay thing before with the changing the yellow to white. The users revolted and then they just gradually changed the fucking, color gradually to white and nobody fucking complained. Same thing with the newsfeed. There used to people, the users don't like change, okay? They don't like that sort of, so there's that factor. That's a golden rule of like UX is to make incremental changes. Again, that's something that we didn't know, we hypothesized on, we learned isn't a good idea, and we adapted and we got better at it and we got smarter and now we A/B test and now we do all this stuff and then you do gradual changes if you want to change, right? This is, it's not that concise, but it's, do tell me if you want me to expand on certain things. Excuse me. I got sneezes again. Fucking hay fever. So Kevin Rose he basically with Dig 2.0, okay, again, you can look this up, but Dig 2.0, he tried to change the site. He tried to change the business model. He tried to monetize it, all that shit. The users went, fuck you, and they fucked off to Reddit, okay? Now, Reddit has its own dramas, okay? Aaron Schwartz was an original founder, and Alexis and, what's that other, the guy that's there right now. Those were the original founders, and there's so much fucking shit around that. That's just, we got to move on from that. But basically, those users sort of, cracked the shits with Dig, fucking killed the platform, okay? They killed the platform, went to Reddit, and basically they sort of, went from there. And so the thing that's unique about Reddit, which, Facebook have done to an extent, but Reddit basically allowed, so before Reddit, you kind of had to run your own forum or you had to run like a Usenet channel or something like that. But with Reddit, what you could do, it had that sort of social forum. Okay. So what it did was, where it's different is that if you haven't been on Reddit, what it is it's basically forums, okay, but they're all sort of standalone, but it's kind of effectively a form of federation where, if you're in one subreddit, that's your community and it runs like a forum, but you can cross-pollinate with other subreddits and you can communicate. So you've got that user account, but you can, cross-pollinate, you can run multiple ones, okay? But the business model of Reddit is very much dependent on the power of mods, okay? Mods actually have extreme amounts of power, scary amounts of power, actually, and experimental levels. Like one of their sort of famous April Fool's jokes is to give everyone fucking super admin access. See what happens. Like there's a lot of those sort of pranks and various things. There's a whole bunch of like history there. But speaking of jailbait, that was the so basically. I'm going to skim over it, but basically this was when mods had the power to just add people as mods to their community. So basically what happened was that every time there was like an AMA with a celebrity and, President Obama, various there's a lot of drama with Reddit, and it's fucking funny. Reddit is its own fucking beast. It's chaos in some ways. And so I do need to explain this because, the Reddit blackout matters. Like I think taking the time to actually not do a 30-second take on this actually, is something of value, hopefully. But with jailbait, so the the mod of mod, they're effectively admin anyway. So you're admin of your own sort of subreddit. You can run it as you please, so long as you don't break the overall platform rules, which they didn't really have many of. Those have been sort of, implemented over time. But the mod of jailbait, basically, if there was like a high profile person, and Obama was probably the most famous one, you can just add a user to be a mod of that subreddit and it auto-accepted them. So they were automatically listed as a mod on jailbait, right? It's fucking hilarious, right? It's like a modmin. Yeah, so they have too much power. So it's not like, again, Reddit's the thing that's sort of, they kind of white knuckle it a little bit. Like they really do, they did, I do kind of, it is a crazy experiment. And that will lead to sort of what's going on with this blackout. But one of the things about Reddit is that these blackouts aren't new. And so what has actually, there's been several actually, but one was 2015, right, where they objected to the banning of certain subreddits that they perceived, supported Donald Trump and elected Donald Trump and all that sort of stuff. There's sort of cracking down on the red pill subreddit and all of that sort of stuff, right? And Ellen Powell actually was pressured to resign there, okay, because she was cracking down on this sort of hate speech thing, sort of out of that was sort of out of all of that Gamergate shit and Trump election, all that chaos that happened there, right? Anti-SJW stuff and the red pill, all that sort of fucking, other stuff that I've covered like copious numbers of times, okay, copious times. But basically, what happened there? Hang on, I lost my train of thought. Hang on, give me a sec. But Reddit is it's kind of, again, it's one of those things where, obviously I'm a socialist. I believe that, people should strike and all that sort of stuff to get what they want. I'm pro strike. I am pro fucking organised action. Okay, that's something that I support, and I will. It's like I fucking support that shit. But so in 2015, they they've had these things where basically all of the Reddit mods collectively, if they oppose a policy change at Reddit, what they would do was agree to or campaign or sort of rally the troops, so to speak, to shut off their forums, and that's called going dark. So what that does is it sets the forum to private, and what it does is it allows you, even if you've joined that subreddit, you can't read it, you can't comment, anything like that. Okay. So you can't do anything. So going dark. So basically that gives Reddit that gave mods a lot of power. Okay, now we'll talk about power mods in a minute, but this was sort of around 2015. That was one of the most famous sort of blackouts, but they've attempted these things before. Okay, and succeeded. So what happened in 2015 was that actually succeeded, where I think it was like 3,000 subreddits decided to go dark at once, and that obviously that's not just like stops users visiting and stops, basically cripples the fucking functionality of the website, because people will start going, most people won't know what's actually even going on and get fucking, it fucks shit up. But also they lose revenue from that. So they actually lose ad revenue and all of the things, that actually like hurt them like financially, right? So taking us, people aren't using the site anymore. Like I went on last night to see like who had actually activated and who hadn't, who was active and who wasn't. And it was really funny because you had like, even the subs that were actually open, like that hadn't actually blacked out, there was only like, even with some that were, like a million-ish, members in that subreddit, there was only a couple of thousand online. And so that was actually really interesting. So it actually does affect your actual, your user numbers and all that sort of stuff. But what's actually really interesting with Reddit is that mods and admins have a very strange dynamic because, again, there's that joke about, Jannies do it for free, okay, which is that, the janitors, they clean up Reddit, right? They without moderation by mods who are largely volunteers. A lot of them are full-time Reddit moderators, okay, or subreddit moderators, and they moderate like a lot of different subs. Now, some of them are employees of Reddit. You may be familiar with the Amy Challoner incident, which, where that person had a lot of power and managed to just ban a whole bunch of people. So mods actually have the power to ban people from Twitter. They had the ability, not ban people from Twitter. Although, yes, because they do coordinate. But, they had the power to just sort of ban whole subs, like get whole subs taken down with brigading. So there's a problem, obviously, when two forums go at it. Like you've had this problem with 4chan, with B and Pol, with this rivalry, but it also goes across websites. So you've got sort of B and Pol sort of competing with each other on 4chan to fuck with Tumblr, but you've also got those, they're sort of fucking on Reddit and they're all, but that cross-pollinates, okay? So where so you've got 4chan and Tumblr over here, and then you've got that sort of crossfire. But what you've also got is a place on the internet with Reddit where those forces and those forums are sort of cross-pollinating and fucking in a constant war. So you'll see that all the time. Now, one side obviously won that in 2015, which was to get all of those fucking red pill, alt-right subreddits taken down, because a whole bunch of, this is where this woke stuff becomes quite convenient, and where I have a more nuanced opinion on this particular blackout because of this, which is that, again, those guys, there was, again, it's just rumors, but there is some, some speculation that, what's the word I'm thinking of? There was speculation that, like BreadTube or, like the feds and CIA and all that sort of stuff had sort of, sort of compromised Reddit. Now, I agree. I think that's obvious. I think, but that's across the thing. If you think Twitter files are bad, wait till you see the Reddit files, right? So that's what might actually be interesting coming out of this as well. They're not unrelated to each other, because this constant culture war thing has just infected every part of the internet. And it's become a useful tool to silence dissent under the guise of either hate speech or, like anti-woke shit, right? So, but I'm obviously glossing over a lot of the details here, but I just kind of wanted to more get to the fact that how I feel about it, because I actually feel, while with Twitter it was probably a little more straightforward around that API access. With Reddit, okay, so you need to understand Reddit, and that's got its own. You could do a fucking 6-hour seminar on the history of Reddit alone, okay? So it's a huge thing. Yeah, Reddit files would be absolutely fucking incredible. Now, what you need to understand is that in 2015, at some point, Condé Nast actually bought Reddit. Okay, and then broke it off into a splinter company, and technically they're separate, church and state, but Condé Nast actually runs these magazines that are actually predominantly sort of those real ground zero woke sort of magazines, those institution magazines like Wired and Vogue and Teen Vogue and all of those sorts of things. Condé Nast owns those publications, and those publications over time have been slowly just been used as tools to just write hit pieces and like, fuel this sort of, culture wars. Like, it's obvious that this stuff has been going on to anyone who's remotely, fucking intelligent and can see what's going on, which is that these organizations have, they're owned by Condé Nast. And this is the thing that actually confuses me, because I'm not sure what the end game is here, because this is in direct conflict with what Condé Nast have been doing, which is running these sort of, talking these fucking hit pieces on. The Atlantic isn't owned by Condé Nast, is it? Can't remember. Hang on. But that whole network, right? Yeah. So anyway, so Reddit is owned by Advanced Publications, which is the parent company of Condé Nast. So anyway, that's all you need to know. But Reddit is owned by that, but they also own Wired and all those lots of publications, right? So they've sort of bought that stuff up. Hang on, let me just. Hang on, just let me check that. Hang on. Where's their properties? No, they don't run the Atlantic. Okay, no, they didn't. Okay, so but again, you've got these sort of these sort of Fed postings, hit piece things. I've talked about that with the when the gender critical subreddit got taken down. I talked about like those hit pieces where they sort of link you all to Trump and somehow use this fucking creative language to sort of bunch everyone in and then get them all sort of banned and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, but what's weird about this sort of the interests are sort of in conflict with each other. So I'm finding that interesting. So either my hypothesis is wrong, or there's a strategy change somewhere, or I'm still a little bit confused about sort of the end game with this, because Reddit is about to go for an IPO. Now that's an initial public offering where they are currently a private company owned by Condé Nast. Okay, now they're about to go public. But I imagine that as part of going public, you got to have your books in order. Okay, you got to have that shit in order, and part of that is that Reddit has like they've fought the good fight over the years, and yes, it's compromised and all that sort of stuff. And it's obvious that this stuff is heavily manipulated. Astroturfing on Reddit is a bigger problem than Twitter, which if you can imagine it, which is that it's trivial to post something on Reddit and just upvote it with bots and upvote it with fake accounts, and it's really cost you probably about, I think they can do it for $100. It's not even like I said, it's trivial. We're not talking about like millions and millions of dollars. If I wanted to turn around and just promote my shit on Reddit, I just chuck a couple of $100 at it and get it boosted onto the front page, and then that has a life of its own once it's there, because people will see it. You're sort of gaming that front page so that people will see it and click on it and interact with it, right? Now, a lot of the marketers, especially the dodgy I talked about this actually in the last stream, that MLM sort of oriented marketing strategy that I had an ethical problem with, was their idea that every dollar more that you earn than what you spent is good money well spent. So obviously, if you are, that's just good digital strategy. It's if as long as you're breaking even and more than that, then it's worth it, right? That's sort of the 101 of ad spend, is that you don't want to be spending more than it's worth, but than it returns. But anything that if it returns more than you put in, then you can only benefit in the long term from having ads, because you've got that brand awareness and all those other things, right? That come from that. So it's not a direct spend. It's not. Anyway, I'm digressing again. But, so obviously it was, again, easy to just boost things to the front page. And you can see that now, which is that it's full of culture war shit. It's full of political shit. It's and that's why I've talked about that with the Wall Street bets and the GameStop stuff and the Dogecoin stuff, which is that it's obvious that this was heavily manipulated. Okay. And like manipulating stocks on Reddit is one of those sort of things where people are just sort of astroturfing and pumping up their own crypto and pumping up these shit coins and pumping up all these things. Now, it's funny because I actually thought of, I didn't even, again, I kind of was like, what the fuck's going on with Doge? And I was like, well, okay, that's pretty funny. That's cool and funny. But it was just like, okay, well, that's not organic. Okay, like it's obvious. because again, if you know user behavior the way that I do, when there's anomalies, right? And but it's very, again, like it's trivial amounts of money to be able to do these things. If you've got unlimited money and all of the time in the world, and high quality people writing copy, and actually, a team of 10 people who speak English and are a creative team. Imagine if you had a writer's room and the resources to hire a writer's room to write your jokes and your memes. You can actually hypothetically have an agency, and they exist, because I know they exist, because if I had no scruples, I would set this fucking agency up and make myself easily millions of dollars in months by, playing both sides of the culture wars and promising this shit and just taking money from both sides. But so, but that's why, you'll see pump and dumps a lot on Reddit, because you can easily manipulate that forum, because through the API, through bots, you can upvote, all of those sorts of things. Now, so the same problem exists on Reddit that exists on Twitter. I would actually argue that it's worse on Reddit, because I think people assume. Well, also, because Reddit is more anonymous for a start, but also it's calls itself the front page of the internet for a reason, which is that people go there for their news and their information. That's prime real estate, right? So you have to assume that, of course, that's going to be prime real estate. And what happens when it's prime real estate? Those with the most money and will to get that billboard space will bid for it, whether they can actually literally bid for it or bid for it in the background. They're going to do that, right? Because because people take what they want. Psychopaths take what they want. They don't give a fuck, okay? And also some people are good people working in the ad industry who justify this stuff by, boosting their likes, partially because of the problem of client pressure and client expectations that, you're going to, do a campaign and it's going to return a certain number of clicks or leads or whatever. You're under that pressure to inflate your numbers at all times, especially if you're an in-house brand manager and you're not showing sort of quarter on quarter growth, regardless of the sort of situation, the algorithm changes or anything like that. If you're not showing that growth, then you performance managed and all of that sort of stuff. So there's all those expectations as well, and all the incentives exist there. So it's not necessarily that people are evil or unethical. I'm saying that the behavior is unethical, but the thing about when it's unethical or in grey, you kind of lean towards, being the hero of your own story and that you're doing the right thing and that you can justify doing the wrong thing for the right reasons, okay? Whereas I obviously have a lower threshold for that, which is why I had to quit, because I was like, well, I can't compete in this market because I won't do anal, so to speak, right? Give head, won't do anal. Become a patron. Pay me to keep my clothes on. No. But basically, that was a problem, and that's the same problem that I've talked about with Twitter, which is that through the API, you can manipulate the platform to do whatever bidding that you want. It is easy to AstroTurf Reddit. Okay, there's been many. I mean, that's why. Can I tell you? That's why it's so filled with questionable fucking shit on the trans shit and the fucking gender shit and all that sort of stuff. That's why it's so, because it is obviously there's culture warriors trying to sort of manipulate and sort of, foster and pour jet fuel on this stuff 24/7 to try and sort of, for malicious reasons. But it could even just be, a handful of bad actors as well. It could just be a kid who wants to be famous. There's lots and lots of different motivations for it. There's no one motivation for API abuse. So what happened is that, there was a mistake to keep that API open in the current environment of people being polarized, justified, doing bad shit. This stuff is out of the box. You can't put it back in. And so the only way that you can really deal with that now is to close off that API access. Okay. Now, Reddit has the problem where they have they have a product problem. They have a design problem. So basically, they have lots and lots of problems. They have problems with accessibility. They have problems with the volume, like some of these like subreddits, like they're called default subreddits, right? The default subs, which is like, music, gaming, they're very general, but they're large. So like, 30 million people, videos, funny, those sorts of things, right? And they have tens of millions of people. Now, there's people who work for free. Okay. I'm glossing over that part, but, they have an immense amount of power, and they often abuse that power. I talked about the anti-work. Go back to the anti-work video if you want to talk, about sort of your quintessential power mod move, which is that, they have the ability, if they get the shits on, to just ban anybody or, take over community or, nuke the community or whatever, right? You crack the shits, you can just shut it down. That's what a sort of power mod does, right? So what was I going to say? But there's actually also a process in place with the moderator code of conduct, which was that if this, like moderators do have to sign up to a code of conduct. So basically, they have to keep it live, they have to keep it up. There's all these sort of things. Now, I actually went and read that code of conduct, and this is kind of a grey area where. So Wall Street Bets. Yeah, see, that was actually exactly. It started out organically, and then obviously, but then it got taken over. Like you can tell, like it's just been fucking taken over. It had breakthrough, but it got that, obviously. But I mean, because I mean, we've still got fucking GameStop shares, man. But mostly because I think it was more of a fuck you to the shorting, which like a lot of you go through that stuff back then. I explained sort of what happened with the subreddit there, where they sort of started to where it started out organic, and then that subreddit had its own sort of language, its own rules, its own norms, what was okay, and they were using the word retard all the time, all that sort of stuff. But then you saw that sort of that GameStop thing sort of popped off, and that short squeeze happened, sort of mini squeeze or major squeeze or whatever the fuck you want, that took off. Basically, that community just became sort of no-frogged. I call it the no frog, which is that they basically started posting racist Pepe shit, got the subreddit accused of that's how you implode a subreddit, which is to just that's off the back of all this 2015 stuff, which is the no frog Pepe. You get your subreddit accused of being a hate subreddit, and then you get it all taken down. And then so that, again, I'm really glossing over a lot of that history because that's fucking dense in its own right. But Wall Street Bets, that's how you just take over a subreddit. But that basically just changed mods. Like I've been in subreddits over the years where the mods will just fucking nuke a forum because they've got the shits on, right? It's just one of those things. They just got too much power. But there is a mechanism in the moderator code of conduct where admins, if moderators are sort of misbehaving and not doing the right thing by users, then the admins, Reddit admins can come and step in and take over that forum, kick them out, and appoint new mods. Now, that's actually happened a few times, and that's where these power mods, who there's sort of, I think it's like 90 people run like the vast majority of the default subs or something ridiculous like that. And they're all, that's where that stereotype comes in of the sort of blue haired, that's what, from the thumbnail, the blue haired fucking no life, kind of person, right? Where they're on a power trip, but they're in their mum's basement and they're just sort of banning everybody. And that was what happened with the gender critical subreddit and the Donald and, Chapo Trap House and those sorts of things, where power mods just went a bit nuts. But you also had this thing with Amy Challoner. So look into that's a whole other fucking thing. I'm just not even touching that one. That one's just one you don't touch. Because it's just, but these things are sort of, and the Handmaid's Tale subreddit, that was an interesting one where, the Handmaid's Tale subreddit that got accused of transphobia, and then the trans activists moved in, took over the Handmaid's Tale of all fucking subreddits, kicked out all the women, called them TERFs, and took over. So the Handmaid's Tale is now just all sort of, trans women talking about what it's like to be oppressed as a female. Birthing, fucking. That happened. That was the thing that exists in my brain in history that happened. There's a lot of history on my channel. But so there's all these fucking dynamics around power mods, but also that thing of like feds and CIA and those things sort of, radicalized people with no fucking life, people who, like to be a Reddit mod, you kind of, you have to do a lot for free. There was some controversy around them taking payment or favors or whatever for certain things. And that obviously led to conflicts of interest and all that sort of stuff. So there's all these other like side stories around it. But you kind of got to understand the unique nature of Reddit that's different to Twitter, which is the fact that they're sort of discrete communities with their own rules, their own norms, and the rules that apply in one forum might not apply in the other, but they also can cross-pollinate. Okay. Yes, I know who Graham is. I've actually known him and I interviewed him, and yes, I know who Graham is. So yeah, from Father Ted fame. Yes, I know who he is. Let's just assume from now on, Jim, okay, that I know everything that you know and probably with a multiplier on it. Okay. All right. I know everybody. They know me. Okay. So, all right. So maybe, yeah, okay. I was friends with Graham recently, up until recently, when I decided that I would I just would back away from that stuff because he's just gone off the deep end, right? It's yeah. Anyway, so okay, yeah. So I actually am the source of most of this. So this is the thing about is that I have 5 years body of full-time research on this. I'm actually the source for a lot of this stuff and the insight for a lot of this stuff. I was there. I was the muse for a lot of this stuff. And because I didn't go fucking crazy and they stole my shit and my thinking and my IP talking about all this subreddit stuff, okay? So just assume that if I've been around and I'm not in it anymore, there's a very good reason for why that is, which is the fact that I actually came out the other side with my research and findings, and I have a clearer picture of what's going on. But I actually, as an expert, know what's going on at every fucking angle that you can even think of with a multiplier attached to it. I've been at this a very long time. Now, this is not just commentary where I make stuff up. This is my vocation. So I'm just going to say that because I've just had these people with their short ass memories with no idea that I've been around this long, because they just assume that because they discovered it that no one was doing it before they got here. Sorry, you showed up. Well, let's telltale everything I've read. I know. Okay, so it's tiring having to just fucking tell everyone that it's just go through. Read my shit. No. Now, so it's literally the experiment that I've been doing for years. So, anyway, so there's problem with the API, which is a problem that's always been needed to be done. But the problem with Reddit is that it also has a product problem in the fact that they don't provide mods with adequate tools to do their job. It's not and also up until recently, the Reddit app experience was not ideal, especially when it came to things like accessibility. So, people who are vision impaired or hearing impaired or, all of those sorts of things. It's less of a problem when they're hearing impaired, but vision impaired in particular or whatever. So or people who just wanted to sort of customize their Reddit experience more or have moderation tools. And again, we're talking about an ecosystem of apps, right, that were built on top of this API that were actually useful for Reddit users. Now, one of those apps, which is the biggest one, was called Apollo. Apollo is an app now this is where they went wrong, which is that, first of all, they've been charging a monthly fee, which, again, it costs money, obviously, to run an app. That's just the way that it works, right? But they have been charging, I think they haven't made a lot of money from it. Most of their users are free. But what they also did was provide an ad-free experience of Reddit without necessarily, because obviously you don't get those impressions, you don't get the ads. Basically, acted as not only a way to customize your interface or like maybe like simulate the old Reddit experience or whatever. But what it did was actually I think some of them had accessibility features, some of them had mod tools. There's this whole ecosystem of apps on top of it, and for various things. Now, so Reddit decided to do an Elon Musk. And again, this is the thing that actually conflicts me, which is that I still believe that the APIs needed to not be free and open and freely accessible for, in the beginning. They shouldn't have, in retrospect, we're having to try and sort of shove this thing back in the box, and we can't do that. And this is the unfortunate thing where this API change, whilst unfortunate that it's taken this long, is necessary, and I actually agree with it because it solves the problem of platform manipulation, at least at the API level. Like you can still obviously because again, some of these problems of platform manipulation, which is that when you're using the API, okay, you can build a whole experience of that auto downvotes things. You can do that. Like with Twitter, you can just build a script, like build an app, right? That where it just auto reports or whatever. It just does those sorts of things, right? So you can build an app that basically looks like Twitter but does, nefarious things. And that's so third-party apps and the API access is actually a big problem, especially with the way that API tiers work is that it was the number of it works based on how many sort of inquiries that you make or how many queries that you make per hour. So if you're like doing a high volume of queries to that database and you're writing back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, that costs a lot of money. So Reddit have said that it costs them millions of dollars a month in hosting just to sort of keep this Apollo app going. Okay, so what they've decided to do, much like Elon Musk decided to do, and I 100% agree with, which is charging for API access above a certain number of queries. Because obviously there's overhead there, which is cost, but also the fact that, you want to be able to like scrutinize and monitor these apps and whether they're doing any of this platform manipulation. And because Reddit's going for this IPO and they're sort of, they're having to clean up their shit because there's a lot of scrutiny on this stuff at the moment because of off the back of the Twitter files. A lot of scrutiny when you're going to be a public company. You better be like squeaky clean, right? I think people forget that when Facebook and Twitter and other tech companies sort of went public, this scrutiny wasn't here. That didn't exist as a problem. But there are eyes on this now. Okay, but this is why it's an interesting. It's fascinating anyway. But I'm still figuring out the Condé Nast thing. What their strategy is, other than obviously making money, but it might be to try and flip it and get out. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see. What was I going to say? Yeah, so, the use of the API. So what happened was in the last couple of months, which is that Reddit, off the back of Elon Musk and Facebook and, all these problems that I've spent a lot of time sort of trying to spend the time to explain to you, is that they have limited that free tier of the API access, much like they've done at Twitter, where you can have sort of a limited number of free queries and you still have access. I mean, that's the thing, is that that this is where this sort of misinformation has sort of permeated, where I'm more on as much as I'm like, yeah, fuck, users should defend themselves against these corporations. It's not that simple in this case, because number one, a lot of these power mods are, politically compromised and they're out of control. And, there's a big problem on Reddit where, there's a monoculture of fucking, midwits on Reddit that, but have too much power and are sort of drunk on power. And, especially post 2015, they've learned that they can actually do this stuff and have blackouts and do that sort of stuff. And they can actually get heard and put pressure. And they actually learned from 2015 that, this is an effective way of organising, which I agree with. All things being equal, I'm, in support of this, which is the thing that's unique about Reddit is obviously that they're volunteers. Some of them are staff, some of them, whereas on Twitter, you're just a user, whereas, Community Notes is kind of like a volunteer, but that hasn't existed. Let's not go with the exceptions, just with the rule. Or the outliers or whatever, but I'm just saying generally in terms of the experience, Reddit is built around, people whose full-time job it is to like moderate Reddit, and that's what they do all day. And a lot of them do it for free. A lot of them, manage, and they use these tools to sort of moderate it. Now, so Apollo, apparently negotiations broke down with this app. Okay, so this app provides an experience that a lot of people use. A lot of people, use it for moderation. A lot of people use it to sort of tailor their experience. A lot of people use it, for varying other things. There's also accessibility tools where, you can, like I said, tailor your experience for, vision impaired and all those sorts of things. So Reddit does not provide those things as part of their product, and that's one of those things where, that's where they've fallen down, because this is the laziness of tech companies, which is that they provide the platform. And that's the downside of sort of being a platform and relying on third-party apps as well, which is that, Reddit could have easily mitigated this by acquiring them, bringing them into the fold, or, building that experience and actually taking that seriously, and not just sort of not offloading, all of this stuff to, third-party developers and expecting them to do that shit for free, right? And so that's the, that's the crux of the matter, is that a lot of the internet, and I've talked about this before, I think, with the open source stuff, which is that a lot of this stuff, again, in principle, I support the mods, I support the users, and in principle, I 100% agree that there needs to be some reckoning or remedy or recourse for users and mods, because a lot of this free share and share alike, contributing to Wikipedia, all of this, giving Twitter all of these hours and content and fucking thought, and the success of these platforms has been off the back of like people like us, right? So that that's a legitimate like labor issue, and I think that's it's kind of, they're effectively using unpaid interns at scale and not paying them, and they're not being compensated, and they're sort of being they're being paid in clout, and it's like, well, that's not really capitalism. Yay. But so, I wanted to just say that I do sympathize with that. That's my main, my political leanings are there, but also I work with how things actually are at the moment at Reddit, which is that this stuff has been taken over and astroturfed to fuck, and mods are, obviously quite kind of a little out of control. And I would imagine that what's happening in that lead up to IPO is that strategically they've also, they all watch what everyone else is doing, probably even talk to each other about this shit, and which is that they've got it's not just the sort of not safe for work sort of stuff. You got to understand, from a business point of view, especially with a public company, the second these companies go public, they it's kind of a death. They're kind of you become they've got that, obviously, that fiduciary duty to their shareholders, but at the same time they also have an obligation to clamp down on certain things, be more advertiser friendly, because they've got to make more money, they've got to make it more advertiser friendly, or they've got to not upset users. That's that sort of corporate. The second they go public, okay, they're sort of at the mercy of all of those services. I mean, Jack's talked about that, and that's why Elon Musk took it private, right? Because it's not conducive. Content moderation is a tool, and free speech is in direct conflict with a public company, because they've got other legal obligations to their shareholders, which will be more risk averse, which will be at the mercy of a board that is whose sole job it is to maximize profit but part of maximizing profit is minimizing overhead, and also minimizing risk and all of those sorts of things. And part of that risk is not safe work content, political content, all that sort of stuff. And also, if you've got a large user base that is largely fake and astroturfed, and there's some people that say that good 2/3 of Reddit is actually just fake, that means that you're inflating your user count, okay? And that is actually misleading. That's just, that's actually just fucking fraud. And that's something that Twitter has, it's interesting to see if there's any charges there, right? But then you're getting into fucking security shit, and that's like not good. So, so there's all of these different like factors. But I also, I go, well, this API change is necessary. Uh, but what's going on with this blackout is that it's actually um, um, like taking hold, and it has the capacity to actually fucking go like dig at the moment. Like there's quite a large blackout at Reddit, and they're basic. Oh, sorry, I was saying something else. I'm starting to fade because I've gone longer than I wanted. Hang on, let me have a look at the chat. I also need to piss. Fuck, hang on. Where are we? It's all right. Sorry. It's all right. I know. It's fine. I just yeah. Um. I just you got to understand the internet, fellas. It's not you. It's all men. It is the fact that every single day there's guys that show up in my chat that explain my 30-year career to me, that explain basics to me, that say, have you read this book that everyone's read? Have you read this thing? Yeah, I read it like 20 years ago. Okay, that is my experience. I want you to hear me on that experience. Assume that if I am an expert in a certain thing, which I am, that I know basic shit. And I know that your intentions are like to educate my audience, but that's also my job. So it's all good. People can look and see that stuff. So I just wanted to say that my everyday, and it is like Matt will confirm that the thing that gets me fucking going is when I like people just go, "Have you read this basic thing?" Yeah, probably wrote the fucking thing. Probably came from me, and someone stole it. Okay, so anyway, that's all right. Um, yeah. So, but anyway, okay. Anyway, anyway, moving on from the chat. So basically, this Apollo app. So basically, they've got like we're talking billions of queries. So so basically this third party app. So they're being forced to, based on the amount of like calls on the API. They're called calls. Okay, based on the API calls, the volume, you have to pay at a certain tier. Okay, so if you're in the, I can't remember what with Twitter, I think it's under a certain number per hour, like a small token amount. You can still, read but not post. There's all these sort of limitations. Okay, and then the next tier up, that sort of $100 a month, that's sort of what the top of the basic tier would be before. But then you got these enterprise grade ones where you're doing it like Firehose style. You got direct access to everything. You are you're doing, millions and millions of calls sort of every day or whatever, whatever. Now, Apollo fits up that top layer. Now, Apollo is actually in breach of some of these terms anyway. Okay, so the thing is that they've changed. I can't remember when that policy changed, but basically, I mean, even just the use of the API. Sorry, my mistake. So basically, where Apollo has fallen down, where others haven't, despite the value they offer, despite all of that stuff, first of all, don't build your shit on someone else's shit. Dickheads are doing that with OpenAI at the moment. It's like this is what happens when you build on other people's platforms. This is why I build my own shit, and it takes longer, but I build my own shit for this reason, which is that you then end up having your whole business fucking implode because you're reliant on someone else's like whims. Okay, especially ones that are a public company and like can just I don't want to be at the mercy of people's whims, right? So basically, but yeah, you should never build an app on someone else's fucking platform for a start. But and I said this when I was doing apps like back in the when I actually gave a fuck and thought there was a shot, when I was designing a lot of different sort of apps and sort of building a lot of MVPs. All of the dudes that mansplained my own business to me and told me, how I needed to do things, was that I should be looking at like building a platform or building apps on platforms, not building my own app. And I said, no, because I don't want, like what happens if they fucking go out of business? Well, I can't take that on. Like that's no. So anyway, So anyway, basically, this app and a bunch of other apps have now, because they're obviously very resource intensive, they're expensive to host, all of those sorts of things. They now have to pay I think it's like something like millions of dollars a year, and they're not making that much. So basically, they tried to get a discount. Negotiations broke down, and basically, this guy posted saying, "Well, we're going to have to retire the app. We're going to have to, all that sort of stuff. Here's what's going on." Reddit have changed their policy to make it so that you can't monetize an app that also use that, they can't use. So their developer policy is basically you can, at the bottom tier, you are allowed. They said that the vast majority of third-party apps are still actually okay. So if you just use it for a small app or whatever, you're actually okay. It's only those that are doing sort of millions and millions of calls. And again, I can understand the rationale there, because that is also how all that astroturfing goes on. I'll put my money on the fact that and this is my conflict, which is that I also know that we've seen this play out with Twitter, which is that there are other interests and opportunists that are sort of taking advantage of this issue and division to in their own self-interest. So I can't see why they're not using this Apollo app sort of thing to campaign against the general closing of that API, because they're also running their own fucking astroturfing apps, and they don't want that shut down because that's going to cost them millions of dollars. Okay, so even if Apollo are doing the right thing and legit, unfortunately, this is the problem, which is that, first of all, Apollo's made it so that they were basically taking Reddit's data and content without actually giving anything back, which was their first mistake, because they were actually blocking ads. So that was, the way Reddit monetizes. And also they, but it's really been really interesting to see that sort of that narrative going back and forth about how people are, again, leaving stuff out, like the fact that free tier still exists, and that Apollo actually have millions and millions and millions and millions of calls and are very expensive, and they block ads. Okay, and that's like and they charge for a subscription for that app, which again, fair enough. However, there's no free, that's like, again, that's just fucking. This is your brain on Antifa fucking bullshit on Reddit, which is that you think fucking fairy dust and rainbows is how you pay for servers. It's like, no, they're leeching millions of dollars from Reddit and not giving anything back. So, that negotiation fell down. Anyway, so they shouldn't have been doing that. That's bad business in the first place. They shouldn't have done that. So anyway, I'm saying that's, but for most cases, a lot of these third-party apps are actually fine under that API. So there's limitations. So you can't charge for the app that you're building. So there's no commercial, so it's a non-commercial use. I think it's fairly reasonable. Much like the Twitter, like free tier, it's fairly, for your use cases, it's fairly okay. So, okay, that's a good point. Yeah, so let's qualify. Yes, people put Reddit's data into Reddit for free. The rabbit hole, yes. Okay, that's a whole other semantic thing. But I've said that before. Yeah, I agree. That's a technicality. I'm moving on. Yes, but that's a different. See, again, when you're talking about this sort of with the relationship, the case, okay, in tech law, where's the contract? I'm talking about the relationship right now between Reddit and a third party, not necessarily a whataboutism about the users. That's a separate contractual, that's a separate relationship, separate set of responsibilities, and a whole different thing. So they're not the same thing. You're not correct. Again, I'm just trying to be more precise in the way that I, explain things, but, you mansplain me then Matt. Okay. So, but anyway, I'm saying, so making sure that we're clear about these are in a court case, you wouldn't have them all together. They'd be individual cases and lawsuits with separate agreements. So I'm trying to explain the business side. I've already explained the user side, which is yes, I sympathise. Yes, all of this stuff, moderators, all that stuff. Yes, I'm over here now talking about this. So, so the relationship there, which is that, I agree with the fact that the API should be closed. I think it's necessary. I agree that, everybody, I've noticed actually Patreon got me to verify my identity the other day. So everyone's moving to identity verification. Solid, excellent, good. And I think that's what needs to happen. But again, that was because it was, we offered something we couldn't deliver on to begin with, which was that sort of ideal, the API stuff, sharing, open source, all that stuff. Open GPL still hasn't been tested in court, as far as I know, right? So I kind of agree with, like, that's the problem, is that this is in sort of contradiction with what I would ordinarily say, which is that when I'm a user advocate, in this case, all things being equal and not knowing what we know about what's going on at Reddit and what's going on with the astroturfing and the platform manipulation that's going on, in principle, I support the idea of users taking control of the platform, organizing, using their power, using those things to, sort of fuck up the company and sort of determine policy. I agree with that in principle. But because of what's happened with Reddit and that takeover that's happened, is that, there's going to be these nefarious, bad actors and those things that are doing platform manipulation, whose interest is in, manipulating these sort of radicalized lunatics on, power mods and stuff into thinking that they're fighting some fucking, corporate, whatever, when usually they're probably actually paid by them, if directly, if not fucking, indirectly without their consent. These mods have a cozy relationship with a lot of these, feds, the Democratic PACs, corporations. They've got a lot of, they do it for free. They don't do it for free. That, they're obviously on the take, right? You can't do things for free unless anyway, that's physics. Again, like I was saying before, yesterday, about when I, you got to go in when you know how long things take and what they cost and that stuff. You kind of go, okay, well, that's obviously paid for somewhere. So you get what I'm saying. So that applies as much to Reddit as it does anywhere else. Like, yes, some of them live with their parents, but many don't. Okay, and that warrants at least an eyebrow raised. You kind of at least one. I can only raise one. I can't raise the other one. But it's but again, so you've got to make sure that you have this is why having a clear sense of the actual problem and what is actually happening, not just, oh, here's my opinions about what should be. You've got to focus on what is. And it's like, well, yeah, I agree in principle about, like I said, that organizing the users and, fucking shit up and moderators and all that sort of stuff. I mean, the idea that Reddit power mods have gone power mod on Reddit is fucking never not funny to me, right? It's fucking hilarious, right? But, Reddit will probably, my guess is that they've probably taken this risk and they've decided that they also need to clean house, because they can't go public. They can't go public with their books even remotely resembling Twitter's at the moment. So the difference between Twitter is that it was already public when this happened, okay? But they're going to go through, this is the fucking securities fraud. If they go through with 70% fake fucking accounts and it's AstroTurf to shit and it's a fucking CIA asset and a fucking all this stuff and it's, it's not value, it doesn't have the value that people think it has, or the eyeballs that advertisers think it has, because again, we've talked about that ad fraud problem of click fraud, where if advertisers, which they know, again, this stuff is closing in, which is advertisers know about that $120 billion US of click ad fraud every year, and that a lot of that is going to fake users on Reddit, fake, views on Twitter. Like, again, they can just use these these scripts and these API calls and all these things to manipulate the platform, whether it is, exhausting my views so I don't get seen by a human, or, exhausting, views on things to make sure that you're just harvesting ads, okay, and ad impressions, and you're just collecting the revenue. Like, I can't see how, like, a dodgy agency wouldn't be taking the retainer, doing the ad spend, and then having a different department because they've got the media department or whatever, and they're taking fucking revenue and they're kind of monetizing the content over here. So that, there's these sort of MCNs with the Young Turks or Daily Wire or whatever. They're actually the customer because they spend ad money and they sort of take that, but they also take ad money. They take money from brands. They monetize these channels. And so it's just this big circular fucking fraud thing. Okay. And you cannot have that and go public. Like, you can't know about this You got to declare this. So I imagine that there's a part of that is like cleaning house, because we know that this is the fucking thing. We know this is a problem, right? But yeah, so I think I like the fact that these API limitations are happening. I think people are pitching a fit for the wrong reasons. You can still get access. You know, you might just have to slow down your script. You might not be able to just do things at the scale or volume that you would like to do. If you're part of a university, then fucking pay for like $900 a month. Don't be a fucking, you know, do the right thing. But you know, obviously, I want to see enterprise accounts also held accountable for this kind of astroturfing, because that's still wrong. The problem, my criticism with Twitter is that they are probably turning a blind eye to the Daily Wire and, you know, those sorts of bigger MCNs and bigger advertisers, because they're paying for an enterprise account and they're giving a lot of money, that they're going to turn a blind eye to the astroturfing and the you know, platform manipulation. And if that's how that goes, that's obviously an unknown at the moment. Like I can't tell you. I hope that they make a stand. I'm not confident they will, but you never know, right? Yeah, but I think that it's, you know, it's going to be it's pay to play. YouTube's pay to play. It's all pay to play now, and that's okay to an extent. But I want the data back. I want them to delete the fucking data. Delete. So you can't double dip. You know, I've talked about this before, but I need to go because I need to piss badly. And I was going to, so, you know, it's weird because what I would have said with Twitter, it seems inconsistent, which is that I'm like not on side with the mods or the users, which is not the case. It's just because I know that a lot of that stuff is artificial and fake, and like, you know, they're probably just cleaning house, if I'm honest with you, pre-IPO. If they go IPO at all, mate, I wonder if they're having doubts about that. I don't know. Maybe they are. But I think at some point, somewhere, they're getting ready for sale somewhere, okay? You don't do things like this without sort of, you know, it's an obvious cleaning house strategy if you've been following the culture war stuff for any length of time. But you know, obviously, I also understand that this problem has been pervasive. It has been something that we needed to fix for a long time, and you know, API abuses is, you know, stage one of sort of reforming or cleaning up the internet from, you know, these bad actors and astroturfs. And if we can deal with these API problems and dodgy scripts and mass reports and platform manipulation, your experience will be a lot more authentic, and that free speech will likely just flow on from there, because a lot of the suppression of speech is not necessarily at the you know, it doesn't touch a person. It's just a manipulation of algorithms, like through mass reporting. Like I said, that the API just being turned off, I get the same number of views, but a higher like number of likes and engagement. So I'm being seen by people rather than by fake accounts. Like it seems to be that, you know, these unfollows and all that sort of stuff, right? And again, you can still do that to an extent, because you just got to make it. It's obviously, like I said before, if they make it $1 more than they spend, then it's worth it, right? So you just got to make it pretty. You just got to make it unviable for sort of, you know, the worst ones, right? So Jim said, yes, I'm not a Redditor, but when I've perused, this is what I've seen. The astroturfing stuff is insidious because it's also feeding off our negativity. Yeah, great show. Thank you. Even though I gave you shit. No, I think it's just, I do, one thing, okay, if you've been watching me for a while, you'll know that I do take the time to explain and set a boundary. And, you know, I try to encourage pro-social behaviors, but I also do try to educate, because, you know, these interactions with dudes, men just don't get it. They don't get it. That, like, day in, I got a DM the other day. I was like, they were asking me for advice, but the way it was worded sounded like he was just offering me advice, and he was actually asking for it. And my whole heuristic is, oh, fuck, no, I don't want your advice. I've been doing this longer. Like, that's my whole fucking career is like that, where people explain basic shit. Oh, my God, did you know that, like, it's like, there is nothing I haven't seen. And no, okay, That's not true. You can send me stuff from time to time. That's cool. It's not that I don't want to. I've got ADHD. I can need to pee and then forget to pee for another fucking 20 minutes, and then I'll piss my pants. That's what's going to happen. So I won't piss my pants, but I'll fucking run. Anyway, I will go. Now I've thought about it. Now I'm going to go. No, I do try. I just try to explain that, like, you need to understand that day in, day out, 10, 20, 30 times a day, some dude says, have you heard about this obvious fucking thing? Or can I recommend this book? You know, or whatever. It's like, yes, I've seen it. You can recommend me things, but make sure that it's like a Google Scholar research paper that's just fucking come out. Otherwise, you're not there. Okay, I'm on the edge of all of this stuff, and I have been. So it's like, yeah, anyway, but I do try to explain the fact that I get explained, because there's also these people, obviously everyone also seems to think that because they use a product and they use social media and that they use a well-designed interface, that they know what design is, they know what well-designed stuff is. And this is the problem with fucking Musk at the moment, is that it's like he's got an 8-year-old's fucking crayon drawing of like design. It's like, no, design is a process, and it's like a lot of it is stakeholder stuff. And he's asking these fucking crypto dickheads with all their ideas about what the app should have. It's like that is bad design process. You don't consult with that. You could maybe, it's like, fuck me, just don't. No. That's not how you do things. And I understand that he's just sort of, settling in, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, if I wouldn't want to be his head of UX, like this fucking, oh my God, the exclamation marks, I'm fucking mad. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, the thing is, we've got to deal with that problem. And I think that's the real problem with this blackout. But the problem is that it's obvious that we're seeing these things being left out already. We're seeing this like, oh, this is about like third-party apps and independent developers. No, this is about independent apps that actually like cost Reddit millions of dollars, okay? And they charge for an app to their users, and they block ads, and they basically are taking user data, not just Reddit data, but user data that is, for better or worse, Reddit's at Reddit's expense, okay, which is their product for their shareholders, unfortunately. But I'm just saying, right? But they're taking that, and they're not like able to like they're siphoning. They're using a free service, and don't build your business on a free fucking service, idiot. Okay, you shouldn't do that for a start. But at the same time, because of the nature of Reddit and the way that it has been compromised, and also, in light of the Twitter files, and you can assume that Reddit is worse, okay, objectively it is worse, okay, than Twitter. My thoughts change, which is that I'm more on the side of kick those fuckers out and take over the subreddit and kick those fucks out. They've been a problem for too long. They've banned anyone interesting, and like they can go fuck themselves. And maybe they do need a reset in that regard. So, like I can see things from both perspectives. But but you're also seeing this. Like I said, they're an app that uses a lot of resources, but also they're misrepresenting the fact that these accessibility apps or other things, they can run on a free tier. Like I think it was something like 90% of all third-party apps will still function as normal. So and this is what we saw with Twitter, which was that, obvious political operatives like these disinformation fucking, experts were like, what about researchers in the third world? I don't know. You're a charity. Why don't you fucking sponsor them then? Like, that's not what, you don't care about that. You care, it's like they all just sort of in unison started going, what about the researchers in again, it's that same thing where, the far right hide behind the children and, like all these, they hide behind these things, or they hide behind perfectly reasonable things to, make their other sinister shit, more palatable. And it's like, well, I'm not going to say, oh, well, we object because we want to have fucking access and do what we want with that platform. What they're going to do is hide behind, sorry, that was what I was saying. Conservative governments, they hide behind small business people, okay? The small business. So the conservative parties, they pretend to be the parties of business, but they're not. They're the parties of big business. And so small business has more in common with fucking wage slaves than they realise, and especially now. And, politically, they appeal, that's the appeal to emotion where they appeal to small business. They're doing the same thing with this, Reddit blackout, which is that they're using this, this blackout, the fact that like moderators are volunteers and that they're, hiding behind accessibility, hiding behind the social justice issues because they've got fucking dodgy shit to do. It's the same thing. And they're trying to just own this platform, and they're hiding behind, using people as human shields and using legitimate issues as shields for their nefarious bullshit. Like not talking about the fact that it, is, anyway, you know what I'm saying. I got to go. I've got to piss. Okay. I love you. Take care. Become a patron. Pay me. Sorry, Jim. Hi, Matt. Bye, Matt. I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. That one's for Paul. I love you all. I'm going to go. Too long. Got to piss. I love you. Bye. Don't forget to turn your microphone off, Taya. Ha ha. Look at the end screen. That's for me. Bye-bye.